Well, hello everybody. My name is Mike at Filmboy24. Today, it's all about breaking into 16mm filmmaking. Oh, sweet 16mm. Just take in the sweet smells of 16. It kind of reminds me of my... No, we won't talk about that. 16mm filmmaking. It's not as hard as some people might think. You see, I started really thinking seriously about 16mm about 30 years ago. You see, I started going to a film school back in 1990 in Daytona Beach. It was a brand new program to this little junior college in Daytona, and they had so little knowledge and so little equipment that you almost kind of had to make your own film school out of the film school. Well, one of the instructors at that film school, his name is Richard Davis, he always, to me, seemed kind of like the guy. He was the guy that sort of made the program what it became. And sadly, the college itself closed down. They sold and they moved on. But he kind of made that program historic in a sense. And I'll never forget, one day he brought in his own personal 16mm movie camera. I believe it was an Arri S, a 16S. And when I got done wiping the drool off the side of my mouth, I decided that I had to figure out how to get into 16mm. Well, I'd already been shooting, and coincidentally, he's carved out a very, very nice career for himself over the last quite a few years in Hollywood. He is a fabulous, yeah, I get nothing from this. I just like his work. He's a fabulous Steadicam operator and cinematographer on a plethora of very popular television shows like Scrubs and Cougar Town, and the list goes on. At any rate, it was kind of then where, although I had been shooting Super 8 already for a few years, I was fascinated. And I had to figure out how to get into 16mm. Well, I was a young kid. I didn't have any money. I was a sort of a fly by the seat of the pants sort of fella. And it wasn't for probably another 5 years before I finally picked up my very first 16mm camera. And it was a Bolex Rex 5. And it was nice. It was fully decked out. I even bought the motor for it. I can't remember the BST motor or something like that. It wasn't the ST, the small one, it was the bigger one. But anyway, I had some 400-foot magazines. I had a beautiful lens kit for it. I had it completely decked out. I had a Nagra 4 that I had planned on messing with. I had a buddy back then. We were going to shoot some cool movies, and long story short, money got tight. Never rolled 1 foot of film through that camera. Ended up selling it. And this was back in the days when eBay was really brand new. I started selling on eBay in about mid-1998. But you could sell a camera and you could buy a camera on eBay pretty inexpensively. And there was really only about 1 or 2 pages of movie cameras when it came time to sell yours. So they sold pretty well and pretty quickly. At any rate, I moved on from there, and years passed. And about 20 years ago, I ended up buying my first Arri 16S, 400-foot mags, the matte box, the whole works. Again, never clicked off 1 foot of film for it because life got in the way, and but I kept it around for a long time. And I had a plethora of other 16mm cameras like the Beaulieu R16. I actually had an Ericon sync sound, like a newsreel camera. I'll try to throw a picture of it. I actually still think I have a picture of that actual camera somewhere. If I can find it, you'll see a picture. If not, picture it in your head. Tons and tons of cameras. And it wasn't until about 10 years ago that I finally started shooting 16mm. So that's where we are today. We are going to talk about how easy it is now to break into my favorite format of small gauge film, 16mm. We're going to go over and we're going to dissect, we're going to open up, take apart a donor 16mm 50-foot cartridge. And I'm going to show you what it looks like on the inside before you shoot it. We're going to run it through one of these cameras, and I'm going to show you what it looks like after you shoot it. And then in a future part of this series, we'll reload this thing. And we're going to reload it with some cool film, not crazy old Kodachrome from the 60s or 70s, I don't know, or 50s. Okay, 16mm comes in a myriad of sizes. Well, technically about 3 different sizes for all intents and purposes. And it comes in 3 different perf choices, or used to be perf choices, including, well, no perfs at all. You see, this old microfilm 16mm had no perforations in it at all. As you can see, it's perfless. So it has no holes in it. Because it was used as microfilm, which you might have seen in an old library or a new library, where you would thumb through and look at old newspaper clippings and whatnot. It came and currently comes in single perf, which is the most common nowadays, like this Vision 3 500T. This is a 400-foot roll, which will run at 24 frames per second for right around 11 minutes. And it also comes in double perf. Now, double perf means there are sprocket holes on both edges, both sides, both edges of the 16mm film. That was the norm back in the day when they first introduced 16mm film. It comes in 100-foot rolls, 400-foot rolls, and 50-foot rolls. Don't think you can buy cartridge film anymore unless you buy it repacked by somebody like the Film Photography Project. They repack this film and sell it on their website, and it's pretty reasonable. So if you're interested in breaking into 16mm film, I'm going to tell you right now, this is the way to do it. Let's talk about cost of 16mm film. Well, it's $40 to $50 a roll, depending on what you get. For a 100-foot roll of brand new, fresh stock. The stocks are somewhat limited now due to the demand. The demand is a little lower than it was 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 60 years ago. So the stocks are limited. They have a good amount of color negative stocks. They have a 70-22 black and white negative stock that's available in 16mm. And they also have an E6 stock or an Ektachrome 100D new stock that's available in 16mm. Most of those stocks are also available in Super 8 and 35mm, though Super 8 is a little more limited. I don't believe that they have the 70-22. So that would put a 400-foot reel right under $200. I think it's $178 to $200, depending on the stock. Here's my recommendation. If you want to test the waters of 16mm movie film, why not look at one of these cartridge cameras? This is a Kodak. I sound like a robot now. This is a Kodak Royale. This is a Kodak Royale 16mm cartridge camera. It actually has interchangeable lens options, though most of them would come with this 25mm Kodak lens, which is fairly sufficient. See, 25mm in a 16mm old school movie camera is not like a 25mm lens on your DSLR or your camcorder or whatever it is you're using. The field of view is actually a lot more narrow, almost by half, than what it is on your DSLR. So keep that in mind. So a good wide lens for something like this would be somewhere in the 12mm range or 15mm range. It's a very simple camera. It is a batteryless camera. What is batteryless? Well, it means that the handle springs away from you when you're trying to demonstrate. It means it has a spring-wound motor inside, and once it is fully wound, which it isn't, that the camera should run for somewhere between 20 and 30 seconds. It has single frame options for animation, and it also has continuous run. Forward all the way to lock it. Don't forward all the way to not lock it. It has your film plane guide here. Okay, let's open the inside of the camera. It actually has a run, lock, and open switch here. Run simply means that the film cartridge door is locked closed and the camera is ready to run. Keep it in the lock position for the door to be locked. Won't accidentally open. However, the camera won't fire. And then you have open, which does just that. It opens up your camera to the film compartment area. Okay. It also has this sort of a parallax viewfinder. This is a non-reflex camera. It has a little guide up here, and what this does here, depending on what lens you have on your camera, you would set this, and inside your viewfinder, it's actually moving a little lens, and it's changing the field of view to match that of your lens. So since we have a 25mm lens, we would set this top guide to just that, 25mm. Now when you look through the viewfinder, which is really small and really difficult to look through, but it's possible, your frame size should equal that of what the lens is capable of achieving. Big word. There are several different options for these magazine cameras. Again, that's Kodak's offering. Kodak has quite a few of these Kodak models that will accept the cartridge film. This is a Revere 3-lens turret model. Very similar. Same sort of setup with the parallax viewfinder. This one has the twist top that in essence moves that little lens piece inside here to orient the proper field of view, depending on which lens you have in front of the gate. This is your gate side here, obviously. Seeing as this side, when your lenses are here, there is nothing. It's also a crank camera, very similar. It has a run and single frame option. These are, the trigger is backwards on these two. On this one, forward runs the camera, forward, single frames on this one. The film loading compartment only opens a little bit, that far. It really isn't too bad. Sort of helps prevent dust and whatnot, but you do want to blow this out with some compressed air or a bulb or something to get the dust out of there. Cartridge slides in, locks into place via the lock on the back, and it's ready to shoot. Frames per second. All right, this camera here, I last shot it at 16 frames per second. 16 frames per second was the norm back in the day when 16mm was first introduced. So most of these older cameras will have a 16 frames per second provision. This one goes from single frame, but continuous speeds, 16 to 48. And it's adjustable right here on this, with this side dial. This one here is adjustable by this little sort of rocker switch on the front underneath the lens, and it has 3 shooting speeds. Well, 4 if you count the single frame. It has 16, which again is standard for these cameras back in the day. It has 24. And it has 64, which is super slow motion. Listen to this. Now, that you'll run through your wind really quickly. So you want to use that when there's, you know, Superman or Bionic Man jumping over a fence. Remember that show? Probably a lot of you don't. That's one of my favorites. Boop, 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 boop. All right, so let's talk about, I'm going to set the cameras to the side here. I'm going to set the film to the side. And we're going to talk about these cartridges. Very, very advanced for their time. And they're very well made because everything was made, you know, back in the 40s and 50s, everything was made way better than it is now. There's not plastic cartridges. It's all metal. In fact, I don't know if there's any plastic parts at all on these cartridges. Now, in a lot of cases, when you purchased a new cartridge from Kodak, you'd get it and you would open it up, and I just have a little piece of tape on this one that says empty, so I'm aware of that. I'm going to reload it. When you would get it, it would have scratches on it, and it would, you know, there'd be scuffs and marks, and that's not new. Well, it is new because, you see, Kodak owned all of these cartridges, and you would pay a deposit, and you would get that deposit back or towards your new cartridge when you purchased one, because Kodak recycled these. They would get them, they would make sure they were in good working order when they got them returned for processing, and they'd refill them, rebox them, and resell them. That's just the way it was. It's not like Super 8 cartridges of today, where they're just cheap plastic and they're, for the most part, not really reloadable unless you're a genius, which maybe some of you are. So what does the inside of this look like? It's actually quite complex, the way that they wound the film inside this cartridge. The first time I opened one, I was actually pretty amazed. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the camera around and I'm going to do a close-up, because I'm going to get a screwdriver and we're going to take one of these apart. Then we're going to put it back together. I'm going to put it in one of my cameras, probably off camera, and I'm going to run the cartridge, and we're going to open it back up and we're going to look at it again. And then stay tuned for part 2 down the road, because we're going to reload one of these, and I'm also going to show you some footage from one of these in part 2. So let's turn the camera around. Okay, so here we are. I have a very inexpensive tiny screwdriver set, or precision screwdriver set, and I have my old 1958, so probably packed in about 1956, Kodachrome color safety film, and this is 16mm magazine film. So when you open the film, this one's been opened already, but let me show you what to expect when you open. There will be usually a cardboard sleeve or carton. Open it up. Your cartridge will be sealed in a sort of a foil pack here. The pack has been opened, as you can see. You will have a lovely guide, a Kodachrome guide, if it's Kodachrome film. And you will have a small card, and I don't know if I showed it on earlier, but all of these packs of film had this little card in it. Now, what this little card is it goes inside, it's a sort of an exposure card, and it goes inside your camera slot here. See, on the side, a lot of people think this is in here from Kodak or from the factory for the camera, but it's not. This little guide, it's different for every roll of film. So if you're using Kodachrome, it's always going to be the same. One side is daylight type, the other side is if you're using the daylight, daylight type film with the filter, the 80B, I believe it is. At any rate, these came in packs of film, as you can see right here. It's the same thing. Reversible, with filter, without filter. So you could replace whatever that, you didn't need to do this every time if you were using the same film. However, if you use a different film, this card would be different based on the ISO of the film and your frames per second that you were shooting at. What we have here is your cartridge. Let's move all the other stuff out of the way. Kodak does not reload these cartridges, so we do. So here's our cartridge. As you can see through the little green window, or maybe you can't see, maybe you can, there's a 50. This is how much footage is unexposed. This cartridge has a piece of tape, sort of a hold it together or light tape on the sides that would need to be removed first before opening the cartridge. This cartridge is also really unique in that it has its own little gate system. This little lever right here on the side slides down and up. When you insert this into your camera, and in the case of the Kodak Royale camera, you put this in, and when you select run on your camera, it actually engages this pin and it slides it down. Now when you slide this pin down, as you can see, it opens up your little film window and exposes your film. That's your 16mm film. That's the emulsion. You can actually see, if you look closely there, you can see the perforations in the side of the film. That's where the camera's little claw would grab it and move it forward. And then when you open or select lock or open on the camera, it flips this back up and it essentially lets no more light in there, so that you can repackage this in the cardboard and send it to Kodak for developing. So what does the cartridge look like on the inside? Well, let's take a straight slot screwdriver. Now there's two screws that you need to be concerned with on this cartridge, and it's this one here and this one here. First thing you want to do is take this tape off of the side. Okay, so we unscrew this top screw. And the bottom one. Just little tiny screws. Put them somewhere safe. Probably best to use a magnetic tipped screwdriver, which I am not. There's a little device built inside here in the lid that will spring when you open this. Did you hear that? It's this piece right here that, as you can see, when you rotate it from underneath, it is your footage counter. Now natively, once you let go, it wants to stay in the 0 position, which is there. When you reload this and you put this lid back on, you have to pull this up, hold that centerpiece there. As you can see, if you let go of the centerpiece, it snaps back into 0 again. So we move the lid, and here is the inside of our cartridge. This clearly is your feed side, the back of the cartridge. This is your take-up side. Now there is a tiny bit of film that has already been taken up. I believe Kodak does that to sort of tighten this up a little bit. This is the one and only feed sprocket. These are your two guide rollers. These are removable. This is your gate up here and pressure plate. And each one of these has its own little spindle inside. And these spindles have a little stainless steel spring clip, and I'll get to that when we reload this, which we're not going to do today, but when we reload this cart, I'll show you exactly what I mean. The film actually goes around it, and then a little sort of a collar snaps over the top of the film. So the film is it really is a crazy array the way this film is loaded. So from your feed reel, your film goes this direction. It goes through your sprocket roller here, and this is a dual sprocket. These are only made unless you were to file down one side of this sprocket roller here. I don't know what this is called, but I guess it's the main drive roller. It's made for double perf film, so the perforations are on both sides, and you have to use double perf film on it. Otherwise, these perfs will just get stuck on the no perf film on the bottom. So it comes off this way, goes through this main perf roller in front of these two guide rollers, comes straight up, follows the edge of your cartridge, goes behind your pressure plate all the way back around, all the way back through behind your guide rollers with a loop here. Now it meets up with, I don't know if you can see, but it meets up with the original section. See here? And this is the strange part. It goes back through this same little sprocket roller here that it feeds from initially. So it comes back through, and then instead of coming back up, it goes straight across onto the feed spool here. Now, the feed spool has a gear on the bottom of it that coincides with the gear on the bottom of your cartridge. Basically what that gear allows this to do is allows this film to rotate this direction only, clockwise and not backwards. See, you can pivot it to the clockwise position, but it won't go to the to the counterclockwise position. Pretty ingenious for its time. It really was. So what we're going to do is I'm going to, since all of this film is now completely exposed and was probably no good anyway, I'm going to put this back together and I'm going to run it through one of my cameras at a very high rate of speed till it's finished, and we're going to open it back up once again. So to put this back together, you have to twist this all the way back over, and you have to hold this center so that it doesn't spring until you have it pushed back on. There. Now we're back on 50. Okay, so we ran the film completely to the other side in this Kodak Royale. Slide it over to open, the door pops, film ejects. Now the film goes into these cameras very, very much similar to a Super 8 camera where you just use the leading edge in, snap. Now this, you don't want to snap it all the way down because it actually starts closing the door. The door is what finishes this roll. Lock it, run it, open it. So we ran this down. Move the camera out of the way. Let's open it back up. All right. Pop this open. And what do we have here? All of our film has been exposed. This is what I was telling you about earlier. This one appears to be brass. I've seen some steel ones. But as you can see, this, let me see if I can get this to come off. This is a collar here that slips over the top of the little spire, or the little spindle here. And this little spring collar, you wrap your film around and snap it back on. That holds your film in place. Look at that. 50 feet of film ready for the developing tank. So what you'd want to do is you want to take some compressed air and you'd want to really blow out this cartridge really, really well and dust it out, or just use a little dust brush, or one of the little film blower brushes, and get it really cleaned out, because they pretty nasty sitting for 60 something years. So now you have your film exposed. I take this and I feed it into my Lomo spiral, just like so. Fingers here. And this will work in a UPB-1A, the 50-foot spirals, the 50-foot Lomo tanks. Loop it on, twist, done. And you can see that gear on the bottom here that I was talking about earlier. That gear matches up with this bottom gear here. See, it can turn, it rotates the film clockwise, but it won't allow it to go counterclockwise. It has a little stopper, a little brass stopper right under here. I don't know if you can see it or not. This one, this cartridge needs a little bit of cleaning to work properly, but now these cartridges can be a little bit tricky to reload, so we're going to go over that on a future video. But for right now, just know that you can pick these up loaded with brand new fresh film at the Film Photography Project, and it's pretty reasonable, and they also develop and scan it as well. If you want to develop it yourself, you have a really nice 50-foot roll here to use in your UPB-1A Lomo spiral tank or the like, if you like. And then you can send it off for scanning or project it if you're using a reversal film. That's all there is to it. These are the neatest little inventions, I think, that Kodak has ever come up with. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and do stay tuned for parts 2 and 3. Part 2, we're going to get into 100-foot spools of 16mm film. We're going to load a couple of cameras. We're going to showcase some footage. And then in part 3, we're going to move on to 400-foot reels of film. Got to get ready for that one. Do me a favor, if you like content like this and you want to keep seeing it, hit that subscribe button. It means the world to me. Each and every one of you really does mean the world to me. I try to respond to each and every single comment. So if you have one, please leave it. If you don't have one, then, well, don't leave it. Do me one last favor before you go. You know it. Punch that, well, you punch it, but don't hurt your screen. Just tap it. Turn it blue. Like this. See it? Okay. And until the very next time that I upload another video, I'll see you on the next go-around.